Fucking hell, I get the name wrong. I mean, what a great start. Let's hope that bit wasn't actually on the stream, eh? Welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. And apparently we have no cameras coming through either on...
We're not doing too well now.
No, what's going on? Right, let's start streaming. There we go. There we go. We're live now and we're here.
There we go.
I apologize for being slightly late and also not being able to say Fresh Air Sci-Fi or know what my name is. We were just having a little look around different ways to stream. So I use Restream, which is something that can broadcast to multiple channels. So people on Facebook can pick us up without having to go to YouTube, etc. Some people prefer a particular platform. So I was just looking at different ways to do it and their bit of software, and jumping back into Discord, which is our current preferred location. I happened to screw everything up, including my brain. That's what happens when you get old and past it like me.
It's been one of those kind of days all round, to be honest.
But yes, okay. Well, thankfully, most people aren't here for the opening seconds, so they wouldn't have necessarily got how much of an idiot I sounded, although anyone watching the rerun will probably do it, because I don't really edit them out. I let people see us in all our glory and all our mistakes. Obviously, as it is now December, I'm representing Star Wars month. But that is not the topic for tonight. Although, if anyone does want to, go into that sort of thing, then feel free to let us know and we'll address it in a future stream. But tonight's stream is about Russell's World and Russell's Teapot. Now, as we said in the comments on the event, a lot of people know what Russell's Teapot is, but not many know Russell's World. So, Dave, would you like to explain that one for us?
Yep. Russell's World is also known as the 5-minute hypothesis. And it's the idea that the world came into existence, fully formed, only 5 minutes ago. And we only appeared 5 minutes ago, but with it came into existence, and we have all the memories of 20 years ago. Our parents had memories of when they were kids, that kind of thing.
So essentially, you could even make it simplistic. If it came into reality 5 minutes ago, then me having my work day to day was completely imagined. That was planted in there as a seed, and all my experiences and life before that, all the previous streams, we didn't actually record them. They're just there.
Yeah, that's basically it.
And that would explain why I fucked up today and didn't fuck up the others.
Because we're not practiced yet.
Yeah, because it's the first time we've done one.
Exactly. It comes from Bertrand Russell's book, The Analysis of Mind, that he wrote in 1921. And the exact way he's phrased it here is, there is no logical impossibility in the hypothesis that the world sprang into being 5 minutes ago, exactly as it then was, with a population that remembered a wholly unreal past. There is no logically necessary connection between events at different times. Therefore, nothing that is happening now or will happen in the future can disprove the hypothesis that the world began 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's entirely possible. It's one of the things that I've heard like young Earth creationists say with their, God just created the world to make it look old. It's not actually old. Oh, and Opie's just chimed in as well. And is saying, yeah, fossils are there to make the world look old. Yeah, I mean, we're on the same train of thought there. Yeah, and I suppose both arguments are equally valid. I don't know if either of them are particularly sound.
No, but the idea is that there is no empirical evidence that you could use to disprove it.
No, I guess there isn't.
I mean, if you argue that, well, look at the date of things, look at the carbon dating, well, the world came into existence like that. It just looks that old.
Yeah. I mean, how does one actually go about arguing against that?
Yeah, there's a few arguments about it, and it really, for the young Earth creationist one, it's actually kind of easy. The young Earth creationist one is called the Omphalos hypothesis, and it comes from an 1870. Hang on, I'll call my notes up. Yeah, it comes from a. Oh, I didn't actually write the date down. 1857. Sorry, and it's from a book by Philip Henry Goss, and it's the idea that when God created the world, He created it in a fully functional way, um, because Adam would have to be an adult. All the animals there would have to be fully grown. The trees would have to be blossoming fruit, etc., etc. But he would have to create it so it looked older.
Hmm.
So all the trees had rings in them to make it look like. So the easiest way, that's one of the easiest, because you can say, well, if God is wholly good and it's not in God's nature to deceive, then God wouldn't create a universe that tricked us into thinking it was billions of years old when it was only 10,000.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's one of the contradictions that you commonly hear. You know, God wouldn't do something like lie. God wouldn't deceive. He might have created beings that can do such things, but God would not do that. And then they'll say that, and then they'll contradict themselves by saying, "Yeah, but God made the world look old. Why is He doing this? Trying to fuck with our mind? You know, he's what's he
Yeah.
do? What are the fossils for? We will see who believes in me now. Ha ha ha.
It's true. And a lot of religious people argue that's the argument that they will use to say, well, no, old Earth creationism, not young Earth creationism.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Opie says it could call into question whether the methodology that they use in paleontology is good enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same with anything that dates the age of the Earth or dates things from billions of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Whether it's cosmic background radiation or carbon dating or any of the other methods.
Well, the idea of using these stars to calculate how old the Earth is or how old the universe is doesn't work, because the stars came in fully formed with light in our skies. So it was created with the light having traveled that far already.
Yeah, which is more complex and mind-boggling than it happening naturally over billions of years, is it not?
It is. And that's one of the arguments, of course. I'll get to that in a bit. Bertrand Russell calls the hypothesis wholly uninteresting. Um, and I
Okay.
suppose it is, yeah. I mean, for some it is because, well, things are just the way they are.
Hmm.
Um, but for an epistemologist, an external world skepticist, or like Opie says, for a paleontologist, it casts doubt into the methods.
Mm.
And I suppose it helps us refine our methods that little bit more.
Which is always good, really.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think anything that calls into question and makes us take a, oh, oh, is that right? I just need to double check my work there. It's always a good thing to do, but still don't see how there is any way that you could absolutely debunk it in any way. Like you said, they're like with the YEC one. Obviously, if you've got the God is wholly good, he won't deceive us. So therefore, etc. But if he's not,
Yeah. And if you go with Stephen Law's evil God argument,
mm,
then God is a deceiver. God is evil. He would want to trick us. So
yeah.
I suppose it depends on the kind of God you follow, obviously. I mean, what if it's Loki? What if Loki created us?
Yeah, well, if he did, he'd definitely be fucking with us more. You'd have
Yeah.
there'd be a mass pandemic, and people would be out there saying it's not real. You'd have someone like Trump in power. Oh shit.
Yeah.
We have an evil god.
I mean, this one is sort of like something like the brain in a vat argument. Um, Useful for skepticism, useful for figuring out thoughts and ideas. Most people won't pay attention to it. Or like the film The Matrix.
Mm.
Any illusory world that's created well enough will seem real.
Yes, and my general thoughts on the brain in the vat sort of argument is along the lines of, well, this is our reality, this is the way it appears, this is the way it works, so we may as well deal with the reality that we've got, because what if we did find out that we were just brains in vats? What would that change? Nothing, except probably more of an existential crisis.
Yeah. It'd make you worried about being unplugged.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
the same thing with this, if the world did come into um, existence 5 minutes ago, I suppose, well, okay, but do all the things still work, or do all the dating methods still work as they ought? If we go 5 minutes from now, 100 years into the future, is it going to say that we've moved another 100 years on? If it does, well, okay, then everything still works as it ought. It's
yeah. And that, to be honest, there is a response similar to that in the popular approach. Sort of. Um, there's three sort of popular kind of rebuttals to the hypothesis. The first one comes from Norman Malcolm, and it's one of the most widely known arguments against Russell's world. His argument is that the hypothesis requires that the newly created people should make judgments about the past, and all of those judgments will be false. And it would be impossible that all of our judgments about the past would be false. It doesn't seem impossible to me.
yeah. I mean, if you are given a story, it could be completely fictional, but you're told it's true, it happened in history, it happened exactly this way, and you make judgments based on that, your judgments are still valid. You're still basing them on evidence, even if the evidence is not true. So if we've got this fake history, but we're basing our judgments on it because that's the way things would happen, everything still works, doesn't it? So if everything does work the same way and we're basing our judgments on this history and we go, right, well, we've got to try and avoid that, it doesn't mean that actually the judgment is false. It's just that it was based on something that happened.
It would still kind of be a false judgment because you would be judging it as real. You would be judging the age of the Earth as 4.9 billion years old when it's actually only 5 minutes.
Yes, no, I understand that. I was probably thinking along the lines of more like moral things and experience things. Learning from history. Okay, you wouldn't actually be learning from history because it only happened 5 minutes ago in reality, and it's just a story. But you could still make an accurate judgment based on, well, we've seen this through multiple studies. Okay, the studies aren't real, but actually they fit into the world and it all works. So your judgment would still be correct, I guess, even if based on something that wasn't real because it was designed to be real.
Like Opie says, the judgment is irrelevant, the justification is what matters.
Yeah. And you wouldn't have a real justification for it. But would you know that you don't have a real justification for it?
That's it. It's one of those hypotheses that's kind of unfalsifiable. You could never give evidence in support of it, but you could never give evidence against it either.
Hmm.
So empiricists, all these people claiming, well, empirical evidence for anything. Well, tell me what you could give me as empirical evidence to dispute this one.
Yeah, yeah. And the only thing that they could quote is, well, look at the background radiation, carbon dating, etc., etc. You go, okay, but if things were created to be that age, how do you prove that not to be the case?
Exactly. And what could you give to say, it did happen this way? There's nothing um, except for an interesting hypothesis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. The next argument against it was originally put forward by Marcus Singer in 1963, and it's been endorsed since the 70s, starting with philosopher Don Locke.
Okay.
And this is the argument that, well, Russell's hypothesis is not self-defeating in the sense that it's contradictory. It does disqualify itself as a hypothesis. This is because it rules out any possibility of there being evidence for or against it. It's framed in such a way that it begs the question, and any question that makes it logically impossible to give an answer to must be a senseless question.
Yeah. But if we don't have the ability to test that now, does that mean we will never have the ability to? Does that mean that if in the future we could actually prove without a doubt because of something, the question goes from being senseless to sensible?
I suppose it would, but again, what kind of evidence could show this?
Well, at the moment, nothing I can imagine. I mean, I'm still stuck on, well, all of our dating methods show that this is it, and this is the way it works, and everything works off of those dating methods. Um, yeah, you're stuck in limbo again, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the clever things about the hypothesis. And I mean, with the memory one that we just spoke about,
Mhm.
all false judgments. If you change the hypothesis so that the world came into existence in 1980, then you remove that all of our judgments are false judgments about the past because we've been here 20 years. So we would have formed.
Years.
Oh, yeah. I'm old. It's been a long day. Um, see, my dating methods are terrible. Um, so we would have formed proper judgments about the past for at least the last 40 years.
Yeah, fair.
So that removes one of the things. Whereas this one, I suppose it disqualifies it as a hypothesis, but it doesn't really take away the problem of justification if it is true.
No, I still don't know how we would go about proving it true or false either way, which is bloody frustrating. I don't like things like that. They can be fun to think about, but you can get bloody lost thinking about them too.
Oh yeah, most definitely. It's sort of like the brain in a vat. Yes, it's a good skeptical exercise. Does not being able to answer it really change anything?
No,
It does for certain fields, like Opie's field, paleontology. It brings into question dating methods and stuff. But for the average person, something like this doesn't really change very much.
that's fair.
Although, if you're gonna talk about being a skeptic and an empiricist, you probably should be thinking about questions like this.
So you mentioned there was another one as well. Argument against it.
Yeah, this one's generally considered the popular approach.
Right.
The popular approach is that we can use language to selectively discount the competing hypothesis. So if we consider Russell's hypothesis and we
Mhm.
consider what we generally see as the world now, if we consider that the world came into being 5 minutes ago, we would refer to memories formed in the last 5 minutes as remembering, but those before that as remembering. there's a slight linguistic difference there.
Yeah.
This linguistic change offers no theoretical benefits over the traditional hypothesis and raises no different expectations in someone that hears it. So basically, the actual act of remembering
Hmm?
is the same in both of those instances. It's just that you would be referring to them slightly differently.
Without realizing that you.
Yeah. So distinguishing things as remembering and remembering makes a distinction that has no practical use or application. And there is no distinction between the two types of remembering beyond the actual hypothesis.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. That is similar to what I said about brain in the vat. We're in our reality and things work, and same thing with the dating methods. If they work, even if they're not real, but they work continuing on, and we can base all of our calculations off it and everything like that, it does make no real difference. So even if it is true that the world was created 5 minutes ago, it doesn't really matter.
No. And without somebody actually bringing up the hypothesis, there would be no reason to actually think of it in that sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
Um, so making the distinction does nothing to actually prove the hypothesis, and it doesn't offer us a way of falsifying the hypothesis. So adopting the hypothesis demands us to make sort of trivial, needless, and wasteful distinctions, meaning that simplicity and economy of language appear to vindicate the acceptance of the standard hypothesis over such alternatives.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, so it just seems more economic to simply ignore the hypothesis and carry on just with the standard hypothesis.
Yeah, that makes sense. As we said, similar to brain in vat, just get on with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing you can do. Everything still works regardless. So get on with it.
That's it. It doesn't help somebody like Opie, though.
No, no, it doesn't. But again, I mean, his methods still work, don't they? So it might be inaccurate that these things are actually millions of years old, but in 100 years' time, it would still show another 100 years on because they were built or designed or created millions of years old to start with. So even though they are only 5 minutes old, the science still works. His dating method still works. They can still carry on refining them. So again, it changes nothing. It just means that the answer that yes, this is millions of years old is actually wrong, even though the science works. And there's no
Yeah,
way for any of us to tell that it's wrong. So for all
yeah,
intents and purposes, it's actually right, but it's not. It's right rather than it being right, as you mentioned with your remembering and remembering.
yeah, that's it. And it seems like such a wasteful distinction to have to carry on thinking, well, is this a, is this a million years minus a million years and 5 minutes minus a million years old? Or is it more economic and more reasonable to just say, well, maybe it did, but it looks this age, so we carry on with this age.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
it does,
mean, sorry.
well, it does mean that people who are doing the aging will keep calibrating their techniques and keep looking at their techniques. So it's still important to think of ideas like this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is, as I said at the beginning, it's always good to have something that gives you pause for thought and makes you just check things and continuous improvements to everything. Like, but yeah, fair. Are there any
Another,
other arguments against it?
um, this one's not so much an argument against it, but an argument for why it's not irrelevant, like Russell called it.
Hmm?
And this is to do with morality. So while there might not be crucial evidence against it, there can be crucial consequences from it. Um,
That's
So
like I was saying earlier about our judgments based on history and whether we should do this or that to people, but actually there's no real history, but it still works anyway, doesn't it?
yeah, sort of. Um, Imagine a cook working in an old people's home. Now, this old people's home has come into being 5 minutes ago,
Right.
and the chef can remember putting poison in food, and his assistant can remember putting poison in food, but it's remember rather than remember. And the world has come in fully formed in such a way that the resident eating the food has already eaten most of it with the poison in it. Who's responsible for the poisoning of the resident?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, you could almost tear this one off onto the hard determinism and its effect on morality as well. Um, yeah, or you could take it down the path of, if someone has no memory of doing something, but they definitely did it, are they still responsible as well? You know,
Exactly.
um,
And the thing is if we ignore the fact that it's 5 minutes old and we just go by what they remember, then they're guilty and we
yeah.
should punish them. And they're deserving of punishment. But if the world came into being with that scenario already acted out, are they worthy of punishment?
Oh, that's interesting. I suppose, yeah. Where you think about it like a computer simulation, you know, and there's NPCs. We're all NPCs, every single one of us, and so we've got our back history, and there you go. It's been programmed that you've done this thing. You haven't actually done it, but you've, yeah,
You've got all the memories and everybody else has the memories of you doing it, but you didn't actually do it.
yeah. That's a tough one, isn't it? Um, have you been created as the sort of person that would actually do that, or, you know, is it something that you are going to do again if you feel that you can get away with it this time? Are you going to do it again next time? If so, then maybe the moral thing to do is to stop the person doing it before they actually do it themselves in the future. Uh,
Yeah.
but they still haven't done it, and that's one of the issues. So, from a protecting people in the future, I still think that you need to sort of have that cutoff thing. But if they didn't actually do it, they haven't actually done something wrong. It's where it gets really complex, isn't it? It's like, as I was mentioning before, if someone did something wrong and then they had bump on the head or whatever and had a complete personality change, and they had no memory of their entire life, all they can remember is roughly how to speak and not shit themselves, shall we say, um, are they still accountable for what they have done, all the wrongdoings that they've done wrong? And then, regardless of what your question is, what your answer is, should I say, if they then 10 years later suddenly have another bump on the head and revert back to who they are
Do
they?
they be
Yeah. uh,
the philosophy is fucking interesting.
it is. It is. I mean, this is the sort of shit that's kept me up at night my entire life. I'm glad that we can have a conversation about it, and other people can be burdened with the pain as well.
It causes me no pain. You know why? Because I go Occam's razor.
Oh, that's one that's misused. Oh, Dave, we've lost you. Don't know what's going on at the moment. We've had a couple of streams recently where we've randomly lost you. I don't know if it's my end or not. It shouldn't be. Hey, it shouldn't be. I have had some issues with my ISP recently. Now, obviously, right now, what I'm doing is trying to buy time for you to suddenly pop back into existence. And there you are.
Hope. Yeah.
You just popped back into
See, 5 minute
existence.
hypothesis.
All
Yeah.
ties in.
So, as I was saying, Occam's razor.
Yep.
If we look at the world around us and we say, well, all these dating methods seem to work, everything seems to look this old, everything seems to correlate, come together, we're adding on extra information that doesn't actually tell us anything new or useful
Hmm.
by saying, well, what if it came into existence five minutes ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
All the evidence points towards it being old Earth. Might as well just call it old Earth.
Yep. No, I'm with you on that one. Definitely.
And it's like Opie says, like Russell says, it's a fun intro to philosophy of paleontology, but not something discussed at any needed length.
Fair.
So yeah, it's a fun thought experiment. And if you call yourself a skeptic, you probably should be thinking about ideas like this, even if not to take yourself seriously or take the argument seriously, but to look into justifications, look into problems with empirist, kind of verificationism, evidentialism, that kind of thing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think all the thought experiments are actually really good for skeptics to have a think about and not to instantly dismiss. I mean, there was a big conversation that came out. I was chatting to, I think, the Honest Atheist on Twitter, and he was like, "Are there any good arguments against physicalism?" So I brought up Mary's Room and a couple of other ones that we were discussing recently. It was quite nice that actually we just had those discussions, so it was all fresh in my mind, and it was like, oh, yes, well, yes, there are.
Show off.
I know things, thanks to Dave.
Well, there's one more to do with Russell's world.
Oh yeah.
And this is from Joseph Wayne Smith and Sharon Ward. The major defect with Russell's world type hypotheses is a methodological one. They leave totally unexplained the mechanisms by which the universe sprang into existence, nor do we have any explanation beyond magic and fantasy of how it is the case that the world is as it is. The evolutionary theory does not rule out the possibility that we can obtain knowledge of how the world came to be as it is at the present. So Russell's world-style hypotheses fail to achieve any kind of satisfactory sophistication as an explanatory hypothesis.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose. Opie says Occam's razor should be the hypothesis with the least number of unjustified assumptions. So a hypothesis with more theory-laden scaffolding supporting it, the better. Which is you're right, Opie. I mean, it's one of those things which I actually quite see used inaccurately online sometimes. Is the fact that some people go, oh well, Occam's razor this, and actually they're almost going between a dichotomy of something that there's an equal level of justification between the two, and they're putting their bias towards that, and actually there's no real distinction between the two. So if you were to say something like the 5-minute hypothesis versus a brain in a vat, both of which have been discussed tonight, for both of them are equally unjustified in that sense. So realistically speaking, we've got the third option, which is actually the world is as it is. Yeah, I noticed you're going there. It's all right. I had a long chat about Occam's razor with myself, Dave.
I noticed Opie just posted just as my internet went off.
Is it actually your internet that's causing the problems at the moment? I was worried it was mine.
No, mine just keeps disconnecting.
Dare it. We might have to do videos beforehand and then post them and just watch the stream and interact.
Yeah, that's no fun.
No, it's all right. I can talk cod shit for hours, so if it happens, I'll just make shit up,
Well, we could also then edit it out, people not remembering their own names.
No, because that actually worked for the. I can't actually edit it out now because it actually worked for the video for the 5 minutes hypothesis. So I have to leave it in.
Exactly.
Ah, damn it. See, I mean, it's one of the things that in some respects is enjoyable about this, but also there's, we're here in all of our glory, shall we say. Whereas at least with the podcast, we we get to slice it out and we sound really professional, like we know what we're talking about. and then you see us on this sort of thing.
We're very professional. What are you on about? Look at my haircut. That screams of professionality.
You're definitely streamlined.
Yeah. I've got glasses to make me look intellectual and everything.
They definitely work.
I'm not so sure about that. Reading is hard.
It's also good because I can always catch a glimpse of when you're looking at porn as well. See the reflection of your screen.
So all the time?
You and that Belle Delphine.
So yeah, that's basically the rundown of the 5-minute hypothesis and a couple of the answers against it. At least the more common objections to it.
Yeah, no, cool. It makes a lot of sense, and I do view that particular argument in the same way that I do view brain in the vat. At the end of the day, even if it is true, this is our reality, so we may as well deal with it as we've got it.
Yeah. And like Opie says, it's a fun thought experiment, but not particularly discussed or not taken particularly seriously. It's good for honing our methods, but not something that we should get caught up in.
No. Like we were saying about various thought experiments, they're all worth taking. They're all worth having a look at and look into, and maybe adjusting some of your views on it and trying to work out. It's quite common that we're all quite guilty of. Well, for example, if you going back to the physicalist view, people might have a view that this is physicalism. Then you present them Mary's room, and they go, "Well, are these things physical facts?" And all of a sudden they question it. They might come to the same conclusion, but even if they do, they probably have a better answer as to why they think they are still physical facts, even if they're not. So yeah,
Exactly. It's like I don't take the brain in the vat argument particularly kind of seriously, but at the same time I do because it's fun.
yeah.
And presuppositionalists hate it when you can answer it. They do.
I've not tried, but like it could be fun.
Yeah.
What's your standard response for it then?
That God doesn't work as an answer either.
Fair. Hey, Lord Bryant, how you doing?
Hey, Lord Bryant, how's it going? Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, always good to have you here. We've just done Russell's World. Dave, do you just want to give him a quick rundown of what we briefly discussed?
Okay, we briefly discussed the 5-minute hypothesis, where if we imagine that the world came into being 5 minutes ago, fully formed, and with people who have memories intact and memories of lifetimes and a history to the world and everything looking ancient.
And then we went through a number of different arguments against it, and at the end of the day, it's very similar to the brain in the vat argument, where everything works anyway. So even if we were only here 5 minutes ago, or 12 minutes ago, 42 minutes ago, as it was, because you missed me fucking up my own name.
Yeah, it was fun.
But yes, so we went through a number of arguments against it and compared it to how there is the YEC argument as well. So yes, you're dealing with a atheist on Twitter right now. They're always fun. Yeah, I do my best to avoid those ones as much as possible these days.
I do. It's becoming hair pulling, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind having the conversation. I don't mind having that discussion about different definitions and how they're valid and how they can work through various forms of logic, etc. I mean, that's all well and good. It's just when you get someone being incredibly prescriptive and dogmatic about it, which you tend to find with the average Lactheist, that they're so tied into their identity of Lactheism being atheism that they just reject everything else. They become denialists, and it's a painful topic. And to be honest, if someone, ask them if they want to have a discussion of different definitions, if they go, no, this is the only one, go, all right, then I'll catch you later. Because it's not worth having.
Bye.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, do remember that it is a valid definition, even if it is not the most sound. Because that is the way language works. I mean, to be honest, you could turn around and go, well, no, an atheist is just someone that eats cheese sandwiches. And, there you go. That's technically another valid definition, because that is the way language works. It's not the most logical use of the word. It's not the most well understood use of the word. But at the end of the day, there's no point in getting into a heavy conversation about it. There is utility to the Lactheist definition. As much as I dislike it, it's there. So anyway, apart from that segue, having just covered off Russell's world, we're moving on to Russell's Teapot.
Yeah, this is the one that most atheists will be familiar with because it's thrown out quite a lot. People say, well, you should, you don't believe in a teapot orbiting Jupiter or what have you.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute while I call up my notes again. I'm getting good at this notes thing. Okay. Bertrand Russell first put forward this analogy in 1958 as a challenge to claims that positive atheism is irrational since nobody can disprove the existence of God. As he put it, nobody can prove that there is not between the Earth and Mars a China teapot revolving in an elliptical orbit. But nobody thinks this sufficiently likely to be taken into account in practice. I think the Christian God is just as unlikely.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I was actually reading a little bit about him. Sorry, another segue. That he says actually he probably fits the definition of an agnostic better than an atheist, but for all intents and purposes, utility atheist. I think that's going through the whole distinction between being locally atheist and globally agnostic to all God.
Yeah, that's pretty much how he was.
Yeah. So with the typical theistic deity of Christianity, etc., he believed that one didn't exist, and probably because of all the logical inconsistencies with it. But yeah, and I suppose that's sort of what he shows with the teapot. But really, it's not the strongest argument, especially as he's invented it with the intention of it being ridiculous, hasn't he?
Well, yeah. But it isn't used as a counter for the Christian God.
Mm-hmm.
What it's used is, have you ever seen those theists that argue using the circles? All of human knowledge is this circle. All of the things that we know fills in this little part of the circle. All of the things that exist is a much larger circle around it. And they say, in order to know that God doesn't exist, you have to know everything in the very large circle. But you only know the little filled in bit. So therefore, you can't justify not believing in God or believing that God doesn't exist. And it was
like
that kind
argument.
of. Neither did he.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, it's one of those things you quite often see. Well, if you don't have knowledge of everything, then you're not justified in not believing. I was like, okay, but flip back at you. You don't have knowledge of everything, so how are you justified in believing? If that's what we're doing, if we're talking ultimate knowledge of everything, but actually a justified belief isn't the same as having knowledge anyway.
Exactly. That's the point. It's not that you're claiming to know that God doesn't exist. You just believe it. You think that all the things that you currently do know or currently do believe add up to this in the same way that You don't have to know that there's not a teapot in an orbit around Mars to believe that there isn't. You can have justifications for believing that there isn't, like, well, how does a teapot get there?
Yeah.
Wouldn't a teapot get damaged over the years? What could an asteroid have hit it and it's no longer there? You can have justifications for believing it's not a true proposition without knowing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the way rational belief works, isn't it? Whether
It is.
it's belief, disbelief, or just suspending judgment, it is your justifications for your reasons for believing a particular, or not believing.
Well, that's it. Imagine if somebody said to you, well, I'm suspending judgment on the teapot orbiting Mars. You would probably look at them a bit funny and go, well, what makes you think it's possible?
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, Lord Bryant's just said classical theism and deism both make great cases for God. After he left fundamentalism, he embraced deism, thanks to his deist brother in arms, Mr. Brass. I know him on Twitter as well. I'm sure there are plenty of good arguments for and against in any realm. And there's so many different forms of all of them as well. You say classical theism, you're generally speaking of the omni-god, rather these days at least anyway, rather than the polytheistic deities, the more creator gods. And yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of half decent arguments. I've not found any of them convincing myself. I mean, I obviously did at one point, but I find other arguments more convincing, to be honest. And actually, if you want to come on a stream at some point and have a conversation about the arguments that you found the most convincing, we're happy to have you on here. As you know from us, we prefer to have a chat about things. I'm not going to try and pigeonhole you and go, you're wrong, and have an attack. That's not the way I like to operate. I'd much rather just understand why you believe what you believe and give you a forum to explain it. And who knows, maybe you'll convince some of our viewers of your point of view.
exactly. It's better to have conversations than fights.
Definitely. Sorry, Dave, though I interrupted you there.
That's all right. So did my internet. It's been one of those days. You know the notes I wrote for this that I sent you?
Yeah.
They took 6 hours to write with everything that was going on
Oh,
today.
blimey.
So it shows you what kind of day it was.
Yeah, a bit of a headache.
Yeah.
That's an understatement. Like dealing with lactheists all day, basically.
I think I'd rather have dealt with lactheists
Oh,
all
blimey.
day. Yeah.
That's not a good day.
No. Yeah. Going back to Russell's teapot. In the current day,
Mhm.
a lot of the atheists use it as an argument for who shares the philosophical burden of proof.
Mhm.
And it can be used that way. If you make the claim that there's a teapot, well, I don't have to believe you until you can show me that there's a teapot there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I do get frustrated with the burden of proof or the burden of justification, systemic justification, however you want to phrase it. People saying that it's only on someone who makes a claim. That is frustrating. There's definitely more of a burden on that person, but there are plenty of good arguments for different things. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's, well, the reason I don't accept this argument is this, and the reason I don't accept that. That's what your burden of justification the other way is. Sorry, I'm segueing again.
Oh no, it's all good because it's still related. So yeah, the teapot can show us, well, if you make the claim, you have to justify the claim. But if you're going to turn around and say, well, I don't believe that claim, you've got to show some justifications for why you're not believing it rather than suspending judgment on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier about suspending judgment, Opie's just mentioned that Russell's teapot is used to
Debunk agnosticism. Say that it's absurd to suspend belief.
Yeah.
in
It
judging.
is in the case of the teapot. I mean, if I said to you there's a teapot orbiting the sun, and you said, "Well, I'm not so sure about that," I think you were a fucking lunatic.
Yeah, yeah. Do you not know how gravity works and how
Yeah,
hot it is around there? I mean, realistically,
exactly. Like I say, it's sort of used now by most atheists as a burden of proof thing, but that wasn't its original intent. You can show good reasons for why you don't believe in this teapot, and not just suspending judgment or lacking a belief in the teapot, but you can show good reasons. You don't have to know, but you can show good reasons for why you don't believe it is the case.
yeah, that's fair. But that said, there are sensible reasons to suspend judgment as well. Not necessarily with the teapot
With the
example,
teapot.
but I do think that sometimes, especially when you first hear something, it's always good to try and go in with a don't know enough about this. I should not make a judgment until I've learnt enough. I know it's quite natural for us to start forming beliefs straight away, but if you can try and suspend your judgment until you know more about a topic.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Um, One other thing about Russell's teapot that's kind of interesting
mm,
um, is that it can be a good example of how apologetics work. So if you say, I don't believe the teapot exists because we haven't seen it, and they say, well, you need a telescope. And you say, well, we've seen with our telescopes and we've seen nothing. And the person says, well, what if it's so small the telescope can't pick it up? And it can show you how apologetics can be built up around a claim.
yeah.
And you actually see some atheists doing this with the teapot or with the comic book examples.
Yeah.
Um, you you can't prove that Batman doesn't exist. Well, yes, I can. It's a fictional character written by somebody to entertain people. They
Well,
say,
how do you
well,
know
what
it
if?
wasn't based on it?
Yeah, exactly. And they're then doing the same apologetics kind of things. They're not disputing your answer, they're not disproving your answer, but they're just trying to make a defense in order to hold on to this claim that their argument is successful.
Yeah, very interesting. Um, I suppose that is sort of how apologetics in general does work. I mean, there's a lot of people with a lot of their arguments, and I'm not just talking about theistic apologetics. I'm essentially talking about anyone making
Like COVID
excuses for everything.
19.
You
Yeah,
start
yeah,
with the
COVID 19
conclusion.
theories.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Start with the conclusion that you want or believe, and then you try and find everything that fits in with it. So, like you say with COVID-19, it's a hoax. Here's all the things that fit in with it. As certain bits get debunked, oh well, it's either well you're just the enemy, it's false, it does work, or you go okay, well no, maybe that bit didn't work, but actually this bit proves it. And,
yeah.
you know,
I mean, a perfectly topical example is election fraud in America at the moment. All the arguments coming forward trying to prove it, and all these different people appearing out of the woodwork saying, well, I was 50 feet away and I was looking through a murky window and I saw them bringing a food van up. And I'm sure that I couldn't quite see into the van, but I'm sure that there was more than just food in it.
it's hilarious. I mean, it's one of the things with the whole voter fraud. It's shown that I think the stats show that each year 0.0000008%, I think was the figure I was reading, are fraudulent votes. They do check and they do occasionally find some, but it's such a small quantity that it wouldn't affect, anything. Didn't they also pay Trump paid for a recount in Wisconsin or something like that, and they actually found 87 more votes for Biden.
Yeah. He still lost, but they actually found more votes for Biden.
Yeah. Oh
He's
shit, we were
basic,
wrong. You lost by more.
yeah, he's basically being humiliated twice,
Yeah.
and he deserves it.
And he paid for the pleasure.
Yeah. He's used to paying for pleasure, from what I understand. yeah, that's Russell's Teapot in a nutshell.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I understand where the argument comes from and its purpose. I don't think it's necessarily the best argument in the atheist tool belt. It
Oh no.
can be used effectively, but I don't think it's necessarily used effectively by most.
No, like I say, most these days use it as an argument for burden of proof. But it's not particularly effective as a burden of proof argument because it simplifies it that little bit too much. And it's also kind of arguing against its original intent because they're saying, well, I can suspend judgment on this teapot because the burden of proof is on you. Well, that wasn't the original intent. It was to show how ridiculous suspending your judgment on something that sounds so ridiculous sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. There are times when perhaps you shouldn't suspend your judgment. The first time you hear anything, go in with an open mind and suspend your judgment until you've learned enough about it. But there are times where that middle ground is just as ridiculous as believing the wrong thing.
Yeah. I mean, if I told you I jumped around the moon or a cow jumped over the moon,
yeah.
and you said, well, the burden of proof is on you to show it. Until then, I lack belief that it happened. Well, then you're being an idiot.
Yeah.
You shouldn't lack belief. You should be going, I don't believe that. And here's all the reasons why I don't believe it.
Yeah. Gravity, oxygen, etc. The ability
Yep.
to jump. There's so many reasons why you believe that to be false. You actively disbelieve, not just suspend judgment, aka leave either way. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Well, awesome. So covered off Russell's world. So if you've been watching this stream, you know that we probably have been here for at least an hour anyway, but before the stream, it's like I never had been streaming before. I could not say our name or anything.
Yeah, I even forgot to introduce myself tonight as well. We're professionals.
So if Russell's 5-minute hypothesis is true, it happened just about an hour ago.
Yeah, an hour and 5 minutes ago.
And that's why we stacked it so hard at the start.
Yeah.
That also means that Russell didn't come up with it. We've just got the memory of Russell coming up with it. Oh man.
Or the teapot.
And in fact, you know, it might actually be that we just came up with all of it. We just had the memory of someone else.
Yeah.
Hey Robert, nice to have you here. Yeah, sorry you missed it. It's all right though. I'm not going to edit it out. It'll be here in all its glory. You will see all of our mistakes.
People are used to that. We'll get better at it one day.
Yeah. When someone takes over the production for us,
and we
gets
get
rid
new
of us.
hosts.
Yeah. Till then, you can enjoy us laughing at each other and ourselves.
Best laughter.
And other than that, we obviously covered off Russell's Teapot, which was originally an argument against suspending judgment rather than shifting the burden of proof as it can be as today. Other than that, I think we're all good for tonight, aren't we, Dave?
Yeah, that was a fun stream. And thank you, Opie, for suggesting the topic.
Yes, definitely. And next time you suggest a topic, I want you to come and join us.
Yeah.
It'd be really good. And as I said, Lord Brian, if you do want to come on and discuss your beliefs at some point in the future, please feel free. And anyone out there who's got a topic that they might like to discuss with us, please let us know. Give us a couple of weeks so we can actually read up on the particular topic that you want to discuss. But other than that, we'd be well up for it. We loved having these conversations. As anyone who's been watching us for any time probably knows that we're not here to fight or outright tell you that you're wrong. We want to have a discussion, understand what you believe. We, especially him, will poke holes in everything, even if he agrees with you. That's just what he does. He's brilliant at it. And
oh, thank you.
He will get you questioning all of your foundational beliefs, and you will spend a few weeks going,
Hey, I had to go through it for the first couple of years of my undergrad. Everybody else has to go through it too.
But it's all done in good fun.
It is. And it's good to question your foundations.
Definitely. Always keep questioning. Right, well, I think that's it for us tonight. We've been discussing Russell's World and Russell's Teapot. I am Joe, as of an hour ago.
I'm Dave, as of 5 minutes ago.
Have yourself a good night, all.
Good night, all. Good night, Opie and Brian, everyone.